Yeah, here we go. We are here with divorce lawyer Val. I'm excited to have you here, Val. Divorce is a huge
Yes.
topic in men's group. We have lots of guys coming to us through separations, divorces. They're trying to help recover
Mm.
in healthy ways. I know that you train or coach divorce lawyers to become better, so you're an expert on the subject. I'd love to hear a short intro from you, and then hear about why you got into divorce law, and then I can ask you some questions from there.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I'm Val. I've been a divorce lawyer for more than 25 years. I fell into it. It wasn't. It was just something to, I was going to do personal injury at first, but that actually sucked because I wasn't inspired by it at all. But I did some divorce law just to kind of butter my bread as I was going to build out this personal injury practice. But then I got super, super passionate about that. Yeah, so blended families, very important to me. I come from a very mishmash of people. I was adopted out of foster care from my parents, who are amazing, and I have two stepdaughters. Even though I punted their dad a few years ago, they are adults and they live with me still, as well as our daughter together. So
Right.
yeah. So very passionate about this industry.
Yeah, and I know that one thing you're really passionate about is the topic of fairness in divorce and how a lot of men perceive that the court systems are unfair. And I love how you talk
Yeah.
about that. And that's one of the reasons why I was excited to chat with you today. So why don't we start there? Could you share a little bit about what you've learned about that throughout your 25 years?
Yeah, sure. So if you are in a no fault jurisdiction, so we're in British Columbia, Canada's at least most of the common law provinces, most of them. I don't know about the rest. I don't know about Quebec or one of the territories, but everybody else, they're no fault. And what that means is that, whether or not you sucked as a spouse or whether or not you were great, it doesn't impact the finances. It doesn't impact the parenting unless how much you sucked impacted the parenting, right? So, and often, in the many years, I act for both men and women, and I like to think I don't act for jerks. Sometimes there's the odd jerk, but mostly what I know is when people are going through a divorce or a separation, they are stressed to the freaking gills. They're worried about everything, and particularly in a lot of places, if they have to pay full support, they don't even know how they are going to pay their own rent, etc. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of stress involved, and it's not unreasonable stress. It's real. And and here's the thing: when people separate, when a family separates, to take one household, bring it to two, everybody takes a hit for sure, right? You're paying for two internet accounts, two of this, two of that, two rents, all of that. Everybody takes a hit for sure. And what people are really afraid of, in my experience, men, and I've acted for a lot of them, they're afraid of, what the relationship with their kids is going to be like and whether the courts are against them. And they're going to be concerned about everything they work so hard for. And is that all going to go down the tubes? And of course, what, if any, the support obligation is going to be. And so, in my experience, there's a lot of fear there. And often men think that the courts are against them. And in my experience, they're actually not at all. And in fact, the new Family Law Act, which came out in British Columbia in 2013, kind of legislated the if there was an imbalance of power, that's gone that way, in my view.
That's great. And so you said in a lot of the provinces in Canada are that way and no faults. How about the States? Because you hear these terrible stories of, and who knows what actually happened, but of guys just getting cleaned out or, losing everything, so to speak. And it's hard to make out what actually happened there. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on those kinds of stories.
Yeah, I know New York is still a fault state. I think there's only two or three states that are still fault, but the rest are all no fault. And most jurisdictions have what they call community property or family property, what we say in BC. But basically, often when people say, when guys, most often guys in my experience, think she got everything, actually she just got half. It was her half, right? So he just thought it was all his. That sometimes happens, right? And it's particularly frustrating when you have one spouse who is very motivated, career wise, work wise, all of that, and then one spouse who is not.
That makes sense. And people that are career motivated often get really focused on that and sort of undervalue the other roles that the spouse might be playing.
Well, and it's so interesting in my own personal life. I'm very open about this. I had the opposite situation where my husband of 18 years quit working, just quit. We didn't
House
discuss
husband.
him quitting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he didn't do anything there either.
Yeah.
So it was literally all on my shoulders.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've sat across the table from men who are totally. But I told her to get a job. I'm like, yeah, well, you know what? It doesn't matter. But I'm the one who. But it all happened because of me. Well, yeah, it doesn't matter. Well, I was actually on the other side of the table having that exact same thing and really understanding my client's pain about this, you know? And yeah, so I understand that pain for sure. Very frustrating for people.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like there's a lot of bitterness with guys that go through divorces, a lot of like, and they get stuck in that part of the process. Like, do you see that a lot? And if you do, what do you think the remedy is for it? What advice would you have for the men listening that might be facing divorces or going through divorces to avoid them getting stuck in that bitter, women hating, whatever phase, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really important. So first of all, and you know what? I'll send this to your list. I have a little download thing called 10 bogus beliefs about divorce you should know. Because again, like just as an example, so if in my 25 years, I've had one case of thousands where we litigated and the father was not able to see his child.
Huh.
One. And oh, what did he do? Oh, yes, he actually tried to kill the mother, choking her to death in front of all of his children, and almost
Oh,
succeeded.
just that little detail.
Just that, just
Yeah.
that. Now, so what happens is, so if a person, if a father or mother is court ordered not to see their children, there's a big reason for that. I have one case where I'm on the act for the mom, where I actually got a protection order, which is an extreme remedy against the dad, because he could not stop bringing his child into the narrative about how much he hated the mother. It was off the charts bizarre, and it was so damaging to the child. And what I always say to my clients is, if you're getting divorced, whatever, your kids are going to get over it if you let them, and where
Mm.
it really hurts kids, and the studies have proven this, is that if parents are in conflict, like if they're in conflict even post divorce, oh, guess what, kids are way smarter than us,
Yeah.
and they can feel it even if you're not fighting in front of them. If you're sending missile emails, missile texts, all that crap, well, the kids can feel it, and guess what it does to them? It makes the kids feel that if they were more lovable and better people, that their parents would actually love them and they wouldn't have to fight.
Oh.
5-year-olds, 7-years, they take that on and think it's their fault. It's
Yes.
that severe.
Yeah.
So, so in my experience of a guy, like I said, if he doesn't have access to his kids and it's court ordered, then there's a reason for it. Now, having said that, there's also the cases where the guys do not have the financial ability to get in front of the court. And so I had this one guy, poor guy. So back in the olden days, I used to do legal aid work, and they gave me something like 5 hours of time, which was less than a quarter of my hourly rate, to negotiate a settlement with the other side. What happened is something like, I don't know, 10 or 12 or 13 years before him and his spouse had a separation, they entered into an a court order where he had to pay $300 a month or something. He had and it was based on an income when he was a government worker. He crashed and burned, kind of went off the cliff, so to speak. Had a lot less income, but also this very limited time. She had the kids in her care full time, so he had to pay support. But then they started sharing them, and then the kids started living with him. But he never went back to get the order changed. And so what happens is she registers with the Family Maintenance Enforcement in Ontario. They call it support enforcement, basically registers with the people that will enforce the orders. Well, this guy went for years. So he couldn't have a driver's license because it was taken away because he had such bad arrears. He owed like $70,000, which was unmanageable for him to even deal with. He couldn't bank at a regular bank because his money would just get scooped out of his account. He couldn't take a regular paycheck or get garnished. Unbelievable. Went for years like this.
Wow.
And so by then, of course, I feel sorry for him. He would go to court. Yeah. I represented him anyway. I sucked it up. He did pay me back later though. And of course, his arrears of 70,000 got reduced to $1,400 or something. And then we were done. And so, but the problem is that often, a lot of times too, is guys, they get served with some court papers, and they do what a lot of guys do. They go, uh-oh, and then they stick their head in the sand, and then they don't show up to court, right?
Yeah.
And then someone takes a stand and says, well, he works in the construction industry, and I think he makes this much money. And next thing you know, because he's not there to defend himself, all of a sudden he's paying support based upon a narrative that's not even close, and then he doesn't have the ability to dig himself out from under it.
Wow. So what do you think guys need to know if they've just been hit with some papers, if they think they have a divorce coming, if they're in the middle of a divorce? Are there any key things you think they need to be aware of, or key tips you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, if someone's trying to serve you with something, let yourself be served, because you don't want them to get, you can get orders for substitutional service, which means they can, put an ad in the paper you don't read, you don't even know about it, and then you're not showing up. So even though it's stressful, show up, let yourself be served so that you know what someone's doing, right? What they're after. The other thing is that often what happens is that there's an assumption that having a lawyer who is a ball breaker on the other side, combative, someone who's going to kick all the doors down, that's your best lawyer, someone who's really going to fight for you.
Yeah. Bulldog.
Right? Bulldog. That's what I have been called that myself. I'm just assertive, but I always want to do the right thing. And that can actually be the worst thing that you want. And so my view is that not very often, but there's rare occasions. I know my firm has had this happen a couple of times in the last 3 years, where it was actually, there are 2 cases I had where the people actually ended their lives because they couldn't handle the stress associated with their divorce process.
Yeah.
Completely tragic. And both cases, it wasn't my file, it was one of my associates. They said to the other lawyer in both these cases, you're being unnecessarily combative. Like, this is unnecessary. And so as what makes it quicker, better, faster, cheaper, and benefits your children if you have them, benefits your pocketbook. That's important, is that you don't want to hire a person who is that bulldog. Now, I'm not saying that you want to hire some wishy-washy person who's afraid to go to bat for you. But my suggestion is that you look at their reviews. You make sure you look at what the reviews are. Are they, not organized, couldn't stand them, 1 star, right?
Yeah.
Or do people tend to feel that they've got good results?
Yeah.
The other thing is I would ask my lawyer, anyone I was hiring, if they've got mediation training. And the only reason why I say that is not because mediation is quicker, better, faster, cheaper by a lot than court. Court's dumb, it's expensive.
Yes.
But also you can get to the same result. Like, I can almost tell when I'm dealing with a lawyer on the other side if they have not taken mediation training. It's so true. So, one case I have right now, the person won't get on the phone with me, won't talk to me about the case. Every time he emails, my client has a cortisol bath, right, of stress every time she sees something.
I'm stressful just thinking, just hearing about all this. Yeah, I can imagine being
right.
there.
It's just so bad, right? Whereas if lawyers are able to pick up the phone and say, and people could be, nope, that's it. The kid's going to be home at 4 p.m. On Fridays, and that's the way it is. And they get in this big fight about 4 p.m. Well, what if you ask the other parent or party, well, what is it about the 4 p.m. that's important? Oh, well, other party has been known to, has their buddies over and does this, and that's why I don't like that. I don't want my child exposed to that. Oh, wait, now we've got a reason. Something to work with. But you want someone who can lean in to what the other side is saying, even if it seems unreasonable coming out of the gate.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that makes sense. And could you explain for those of us that don't know, I bet a lot of guys get slapped with divorce papers. They don't even know what mediation is versus the court process. Could you explain what that is?
Yeah. Such a great point. Okay, so basically there is, going to court, stupid and expensive. To be clear, at the end of the day, I would say 95% of all court matters, provincial courts a bit more, but most matters settle before going to trial, right? However, what a lot of lawyers, not everybody, but a lot of lawyers, what they do is they say, okay, let's exchange our financial information. Let's see if we can get some kind of interim thing going. And again, it depends on if people are high conflict or low conflict. You deal with it in
Yes.
different ways.
Yeah.
And what my firm does is essentially we triage it. And what I mean by that, we start with saying, like someone, let's say they've just separated or they just found out they're separated. They come in to see us and we say, how we want to engage in the process is we say, okay, if they're another lawyer that I have respect for or no, maybe we can deal with it by way of a four-way meeting. So no court, no judge, two lawyers, two clients rolling up their sleeves. Let's try and get a deal done, right? There's a few lawyers in my city that I won't waste my clients' money or my time with, but a lot of lawyers are very effective that way. But maybe, there's a little bit of trust issues there. Well, what a mediation is that you actually have a fifth person in the room, right? So you have the two clients, two lawyers, and then you have somebody who is very experienced about family law. Mostly the parties share the cost of that. And then they have that person's job is to try to get both sides to settle. And, mediators, in my experience, we all have our favorites that we go to, and the lawyers typically agree, this is the mediator we're going to go to. If you have a very low conflict case, you can go to the Justice Center in BC and do a free mediation, but I'm often concerned about that because they have a mandate for it to be equal care. It's not always the right answer.
Right.
But then there's another strategy that I think is the bomb, and it's called mediation arbitration. So what happens is before you even start the process, you enter into an agreement that basically says, if we're trying to mediate this, we're going to try to come up with an agreement between us. But if we don't settle, the mediator, whose job was to be neutral and have the two of us agree, they're going to take off their mediator hat. They're going to stick on their arbitration hat. They're now our private judge, and they're just going to tell us the way it is. Right. So very, very powerful. Because often, if people go to mediation, the mediation is like, if you don't settle, now you got to go to court and start all over again. Nope, you just set another day for arbitration, and it's done. Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm so happy that you shared it earlier, just like that if somebody doesn't have custody of the kids, there's something going on. There's something that happened, because I grew up playing hockey, and my dad played hockey, and there were judges on his hockey team. Some of my friends' dads were judges, and this kind of thing. And it seemed like they were reasonable people, and they were dealing in the divorce courts and stuff like that. And it just smelled a little fishy to me, these stories of these guys that we sometimes see in men's group, or you see in like the real bitter women hating forums like Red Pill and MGTOW, those kind of organizations that are out there of men that are kind of anti-women or anti-feminist, is that, I got screwed, the courts are out to screw us. But it just never made sense to me. So I'm happy that you explained that. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, this one case I've had, the guy was self-represented on the other end. I represented the mom. We did a 13-day Supreme Court trial. And then we did over 30 court applications. Now, if you check this guy's profile on Facebook or Instagram, there's pictures of me with horns and, I'm the devil and all kinds of stuff. And
maybe a bulldog, but not the devil. Come on.
Well, geez, but I mean, my client says, you saved my child's life. I mean, literally, if any of his friends contact the child, he goes to jail. And what's very interesting about that is that when we've done all those court applications, he would always pack the courtroom with his friends and supporters. And then when it was time for my client to tell her story or me to give my submissions on my client's behalf, nobody was ever in the courtroom. Right? So they've only ever heard one narrative. And it's interesting because one of my very close friends is an acquaintance of someone who's on this guy's side. And she said, "What's wrong with your ex-girlfriend? She's freaking psycho." And he's like, "Oh," and at first he just said, "She's just doing her job." And I said, "No, I'm not just doing my job. I won't do my job and do the wrong thing. Absolutely not. It's the right thing for very good reason." Yeah. Has he ever shared with her the 30 different written decisions that the court has made about
Yeah.
this matter.
Yeah.
I don't think he has, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there you go. And so, I mean, you've seen a lot of these things. You've been through a divorce yourself. Like, can you share how you can potentially save a marriage, how you can potentially avoid divorce and just separate or avoid some of this nastiness,
oh my God. Okay. So, yes. Well, a couple things. In retrospect, I know I didn't have a chance with my marriage. I know that just knowing him and all of that. And I should have left him 7 years earlier, but I didn't know when to give up.
People say
However,
that a lot. People say that a lot. Yeah.
yeah. And to be clear, I have all his children living with me, and I'm only the mom of one. And we have holidays together and Christmas, and we have a friendly relationship. And
Great.
he has a new relationship now, which is, a bit weird for me. And, it's a bit of an adjustment, but good.
Yeah.
And, so a couple things I would say about that. Number one, there's an acronym. It's called Brief Informative Friendly Firm, BIF. So whenever you're communicating with your spouse, your ex-spouse, no matter how hurt, no matter how pissed off, no matter how upset you are, you just want to keep your communications brief, informative, friendly, firm. Even if they light the fire, okay? Just don't throw gasoline on it, right? So if she says, you know what, I knew that you were out with your slut the other night, you freaking piece of shit, right? Something really awful, right?
Yeah.
And, once your kids get older, they're going to know what kind of person you are, okay? As an example, okay?
Yes.
He may respond with, instead of, oh, yeah, all the things. Right?
Well,
Yeah, doesn't help. And I've actually won trials on the basis of this formula if people are in high conflict. When someone sends those missiles, those big long emails insulting everything about the person, and they come back with, I hope you're having a really nice weekend with our child. The child's dentist appointment is on Wednesday. Please let me know if you're there. And I don't agree with what you're saying. I don't agree with your narrative there. Wishing you all the best. Boom, done, right?
Yeah.
And I often say to my clients, do you think that if when you've spent that 4 hours writing that missile email, do you think the other side is going to read it and go, oh, yeah, oh, I'm so wrong.
Wow, I'm wrong in all these ways.
Points.
I was wrong all along. Just this one email, that's what I needed. Yeah.
No. It's never going to work. So why not just do the brief, informative, friendly, firm, and turn off your, turn off the computer and go and spend a nice evening, binge on Netflix, do whatever. But, don't spend all your energy in that. And I honestly think that's what transformed my relationship with my ex, because I just didn't bite.
Yeah.
I just would not. And that benefits our children. I mean, I still see his children as my children, even one's 30, one's 23. And then the other thing is, and I've never liked this description of it, because I don't know if you've heard of Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication.
I have, yes. I was just thinking about that actually when you brought up the BIF. I was like thinking about a situation I was in a few months ago, and I was like, oh yeah, I wonder if she studied nonviolent communication. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So that's the second one. I don't like the name of it because, wait, I'm not violent, but instead
Violence?
I just bad name, right? That's why I resisted it for so long. But when I saw you do this, it's how it made me feel, etc. So really good. And then the third thing, believe it or not, and it's great for parenting, but it's actually great for anyone. It sounds so ridiculous, but how to talk so kids will listen, and how to listen so kids will talk.
Huh.
And so basically, it's transformed my relationship with my daughter, who's now 18. But basically, when she would fall down, when she's little, like you always kind of want to go, oh no, it's okay, you're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. They're crying. You know what? No, they're not all right. They're hurt.
Yeah.
It sucks. Don't make it better. Just allow them to be upset. And so what I always used to do when she was upset about something, when, putting her at about 8 or 9 years old, and she would say she was upset about something, I'd say, okay, well, maybe the teacher, I'm trying to make it better. Instead of going, wow, you know what? That's crappy. How did that make you feel?
Yeah.
When your teacher made you take off your hoodie, whatever the thing was, right? Instead of, well, it's just your hoodie and it's ugly anyway, you know what I'm saying? And I felt that, my marriage may have lasted longer when he did have a complaint or concern, instead of me saying, oh, no, it's okay. Like, I'm going to fix it. Like, blah. Instead of going, okay, you know what? That must have sucked for you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
definitely.
Just own it, you know?
Yeah.
Because even if you think they're being unreasonable or whatever, they're having, like, as long as they're being legitimate, and you assume that they are, because most people are, if they really care about their relationships, they want to be doing their best. That I think that that could be very transformative to being able to be with the other person in their hurt.
Yeah. And just show up for them anyway, even though you might be adversaries through this process or whatever. Yeah.
Oh yeah, or in relationships, or even in that process. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. What are the main reasons that you see people getting divorced? Like if you could boil them down to top 3 or top 5, what would they be?
Well, when people get very abusive, and I don't mean abusive as in when it does happen where someone's punching the person in the face. It's actually not that.
No.
It's more or less a profound, I would say, disrespect, like a
Yes.
profound disrespect. I think that's when it really goes sideways. And I mean, yes, sure, there's personality disorders. That's a big one. Drug and alcohol challenges. Sure. Okay. That's a totally other level, and people can't necessarily survive through that. But
Hmm.
I find that where it really goes south and eventually someone's not going to take it anymore is when there's disrespectful communication. And we all screw up. And so if we are
Yes.
disrespectful or say the wrong thing, just come back and own it for real and say,
Yeah.
wow, yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah. Makes
But I
sense.
think that's what it is. And
Yeah.
and
I get,
also,
yeah. What else?
controlling stuff. Like some people, I mean, they do all the relationships in balance. One person's carrying the weight,
Hmm.
more often. But I find that even in those relationships tends to be fine as long as there's real respect there.
Yeah. Yeah, respect and resentment kind of seem to oppose each other. Like
Oh,
over time, resentment builds, and then respect just goes down, and eventually you can't
yeah,
even see that person anymore because you're just looking at it through this lens, dirtied
yeah,
with resentment. Hey.
yeah, exactly. And I know in my own marriage, my husband hated me, and I mean, it was, and I have the guilt of raising my daughter in a household where her mom, who did everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
paid the bills, organized everything, right? But where I was treated with contempt and disrespect, and
Hmm.
that's what I taught. And I didn't have that in my home when I was being raised. I mean, I had a stay-at-home mom and a dad that really treated my mom well. They loved each other and were nice to each other.
Yeah. Well, going a little deeper here, like I want to ask a follow-up question. And this is more me putting my psychologist hat on, even though I'm not one. My armchair
Mm-hmm.
psychology hat on. Would you say that the signs were there early on that, like, looking back, that you guys were headed for that, like that kind of a place, in the early days?
That's a great question. I was I think I was such here I am, a divorce lawyer, and I'm unicorns and rainbows, right? In
Yeah.
retrospect, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, duh.
Yeah.
It's so obvious. Like, he was always really nice to me, and we were very, very much in love. But he would get mad at me 1 to 3 days a month, and he wouldn't talk to me. I couldn't say anything right, and and then uh, and then he would just get over it.
Yeah.
But it was always excruciating for me when he did that. And then one time, but I actually think I'm just not a very critical person of my partner, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not very much that way. But one time I gave him heck about something. I don't know, he partied for 6 hours, 36 hours straight. And,
Yeah.
I thought he was kind of offside. And he was late twice. And I just said, don't do that, right? And then it was just like his heart went, vroom, and
Yeah.
that was it.
Close. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that whatever that pattern was of just like shutting down, running away, the avoidant thing, with
Yeah.
conflict or whatever, a lot of people have that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then he had the affair with my really close friend and all of that. That sucked too. But I took him back after that too.
That just tips things over. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back at that point, probably, right?
Well, no, I was so heartbroken. I actually took him back after that, but he came back physically, but he never really came back. So I just
Yeah.
got to pay all the bills for 7 more years.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'll tell you why I'm asking. It wasn't to poke into your affairs. It's because I too have had tragic relationships. I too have been cheated on quite a bit. I too have had relationships with people where we probably could have stayed together and we probably could have gotten married, but there were unhealthy patterns, kind of like what you described, of just like weird communication blocks where we're like communicating well, and then all of a sudden one person would shut down the other. And my suspicion after setting in on thousands of men's groups and just observing guys going through breakups or dating is that people aren't intentional enough about the partner they choose. Because I've had so many tragic relationships. And now I'm with a woman who we've been together for almost 3 years now. And it's just so flowy and easy. And there's hard things we have to communicate through, but like our communication, there's no blocks around it. You know, we communicate through things in a very healthy way. We close the loop in the way that both of us need. And so now and this is just my opinion, so don't take it with a grain of salt, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are as a divorce lawyer, is that people aren't intentional enough about choosing those partners. They look at that pattern like the one you described in your ex-husband or the ones that in similar things where I've been cheated on. The signs were there very early on that this is a person who, when shit hit the fan, they were going to either run away or, you know, go party or whatever, you know, and I continued to go down the path with that until it got to a point where I got cheated on so many times from different partners that I was like, you know, I'm going to approach this differently. And instead of being a little angsty, needy for it, I sit back and go, is this communication pattern really healthy for me? Is this really the kind of experience I want to have? I have friends where it's easy. Why is this difficult? You know, and then I'd get out of that relationship and look for the next thing. And it really paid dividends. And I see that happening for other people too. But I'd love to hear your experience as somebody who did go through divorce and also as a divorce lawyer. Like, does it really just come down to a lot of the time these people just don't work well together in the long term?
Well, okay, great question. So my husband and I, my ex-husband, well, we're not divorced yet, but you know.
Yeah.
He's,
Yeah.
officially, but we have a final agreement and all that stuff. But he actually thinks it was successful.
Huh.
Because to him, 18 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And in my family, people stay together. I mean, two of my sisters, I've got 5 older siblings. 2 of my sisters are with the new guys of 25 years, right? So I had, well, what's up with Valerie? Why is she such a disaster, right? So I had all these things, right? But in his family, that was actually a success.
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
Wow.
And then also, yes, people, I had lots of clients who say, well, and one thing I'll say about my marriage was that we were deeply in love, for sure. But a lot of my clients will say, well, you know, she was really nice and, you know, she treated me well. And
we had fun. Yeah. We had so much fun. We liked the same things, but it doesn't matter if they call you names or stuff like that when they get upset or, you know.
And I also think that, you know, you have to know that that's your person, right? Like to this day, you know, even when I hug my husband, and I've had, you know, I'm still close with most of my ex-boyfriends and stuff, they'll say, what? I couldn't hug my ex-wife, but I do that. And I hug him like, oh my God, there's my person, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people, you know, they kind of think it's time to get married, right? You know, there's cultural pressure, huge on people to couple, right? To couple up for sure. You know, and I think people often fall into that, men and women.
Yeah, I just see a lot of the communication patterns that people get stuck in that resembled what I went through, and I'm like, they're really unhealthy. For example, unhealthy for me. I mean, not to put blame on the other person, but just like I'm somebody who grew up in a household where I had a father who would go, I don't want to talk about it. That's it. And then you go and slam doors and then leave the house or whatever. So I like to close the loop. I like to talk through things and resolve, and then, you know, and then feel better about it. Even if we're still upset at each other, at least we're being nice. But I kept ending up with these partners that resembled my dad, which is usually how it goes, right? Trying to resolve that conflict unconsciously. And all these, I see a lot of these unhealthy patterns in relationships around me. I'm like, I don't know if that's it doesn't necessarily have to be that difficult. And I feel like I can see a lot of these people heading towards that divorce, you know?
Oh, yeah, totally. I know one of my mentors says, I don't want to work on my relationship. I want to work a relationship that works.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought, oh, well, that's true. And what's so cool, too, I think, you know, I think what schools are now talking about, at least ones my daughter's gone to, is that they actually talk about getting triggered and stuff I'm 55. We never talked about getting triggered, you know, in school, like actually, you know, just having that, almost feeling bad. I used to feel bad or guilty for being very upset about something, even if the upset was in retrospect legitimate, right?
Yeah. Interesting. One question I was really excited to ask you is like, given that you've seen so many divorce cases and so many different kinds of folks, you know, I see so many guys getting stuck in the bitter stage of a divorce and being like, women are they're all branch swingers or they're all gold diggers. I would love to hear if you think that any of those stereotypes are true with both men and women. Are men cheaters, you know, typically in relationships? Are women gold diggers? Because I have my own thoughts on the matter, but I would love to hear what you think.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So There are some people, absolutely. In my experience, when people separate, the vast majority of women, first of all, they want to keep the house if they can,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
They want to, have the stability for the kids if they can. That just tends to be important,
Yeah.
if we were
Right.
to
Makes
gender it,
sense. Yeah.
you know, and most women are very fearful about how they're going to make ends meet, how it's going to work. At least with my particular, I tend to act for people who are middle of the road. So I don't act for bajillionaires and I don't act for people in poverty. I kind of like the mid management, the
Yeah.
average
Yeah.
person. And so, and then women are often like, oh, I'm entitled to that much for support. And men are going, I have to pay that much for support. So
Yeah.
there's different views about that. And I always say to my guy clients is that the most conservative men, mostly men, created this in our country, created this legislation, and they think these numbers are fair. Problem
Mm.
is when you're living in a high rent area, like I'm in Victoria, British Columbia, if a person has to pay the full ride on support, that can end up really causing them to have to couch surf, right? And
Interesting.
so, so it's a real concern. Again, when people are relatively equal, then all of that goes away. And there's an assumption, again, unless it's against the children's best interest, that they are in more or less a shared care situation.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say to younger guys who are newer in relationships, if if it's early on in your relationship and she's not someone who is making her life happen, freaking run now,
Run for the
right?
hills. Yeah. It doesn't matter if she's pretty. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you
I
guys
don't care
have
how good
fun.
looking she is,
Yeah.
or how fun she is, I've had cases, years ago. One of my first cases, and it's back when I would do wills. I don't anymore, but where a couple came in and, one person had they were more mature. They had a lot of money. The other person had a lot less. Well, and they didn't have children. Well, that doing the will, that discussion broke up their relationship. And I said,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
thank God,
Yeah.
right? Thank God that happened. And, it's interesting. I have another case where a guy, he actually, he's in his late 20s. He actually has several $1,000,000 worth of properties because his very close friend is super smart about real estate. His girlfriend has no idea. And she has a bit of an idea, right? But he wants to be able to protect those assets if they
Right.
separate, but he doesn't want to be a greedy jerk either. He just doesn't want her to get half when she has nothing to do with anything, right?
Right.
And so the discussion I'm having with him, and he's saying, like, I really like her and I don't want to break up and I don't want to lose my relationship. And I said, well, you've got, under the Family Law Act, you've got, until August to get her to sign an agreement. And if that blows up your relationship, well, it was going to get a lot more blown up 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road.
Right. I've seen that. I've seen that in men's group, guys scared or being like, oh, my, that having that conversations put my relationship on the rocks. My girlfriend, when I talked about that with her, she said not to compare apples to oranges or say that I'm in any better position because the stats say I'll probably get divorced just like everybody else. But yeah. She's like, oh yeah, we should totally talk about that and figure out what that could look like, and so that gave me confidence that I probably don't have to, but
always want to.
Yeah, you
Clarity
always
and
want
agreement.
to. Yeah.
Because, let me be clear about that. Because, well, first of all, when kids are involved, it's very, very different. But people have different assumptions. Do you know, have I ever had a case where a guy says, no, she said she didn't want any of my stuff? Like if we separated? A lot.
100% of the time.
Yeah. Well, no, other people are no bones about it. But of those people where they stuck by that original thing, I don't want anything that you have. If the guy's assets have increased, I don't know if I've ever had a case, maybe one or two, where the person said, where their partner said, you know what, I didn't want his stuff and I mean it, but nobody else.
Yeah, it's just human nature, right? If you're entitled to it, you'll take it usually.
And we rewrite the story too, right?
Yeah, friends and family write the story. The lawyers write the story, I imagine.
Right.
They get into your head, they get into people's heads, and then it's, oh yeah, I can make this much. Okay, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks for catching that, by the way. Thanks for leaning into me there and being like, no, you should do it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And again, if it breaks up your relationship, it's going to save you a lot later. And maybe it's an opportunity for discussion. And I don't know if you guys have children or if you're going to have
Nope,
children,
not yet.
but that tends to change everything as well, you know. And that's where, I mean, I didn't think I would ever be dividing my assets or having to refinance my home to pay out my ex for support. That anyway, yeah.
You were
So
already
you know,
giving.
I'm on the
Yeah, 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 exactly. So how can you? And I appreciate you sharing the details of that, by the way, because I like that you not only are a divorce lawyer, but you've been through it yourself. I think that's really cool, and that you don't mind joking around about it.
And what's so important, which is so interesting, is that okay, this would have been helpful if his lawyer had told me this. So first of all, he hires a lawyer. I'm so hurt, so hurt. Who does he think I am? I think, okay, wait, he's divorcing a divorce lawyer, so fair enough. He can hire a lawyer.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Lawyer up.
what
Yeah.
he lawyer up, right? But you know, he ended up hiring a person I have a ton of respect for. I didn't know her at all at the time, and and the one thing I wish she had shared with me at the beginning was that he said, "Look, I want our agreement to be honorable in the end. I want our friends like Jody and Carmen and da da da, because we're part of a big friend group, to know the agreement was honorable." You know, I didn't know that at the time, so I was terrified.
Oh
We had a
yeah.
long-term relationship. There's something called the rule of 65. If you add up how many years you've been together, plus a person's age, if it's more than 65, then it's like an ongoing support obligation kind of forever till you retire.
Huh.
So I was screwed. And so and I'd walk in the woods every morning and just say, please let it be honorable. Please let it be honorable.
Yeah.
And the day we settled, of course, there's more than I wanted to pay. But the day we settled, he went across the street to his friend's house, and I saw him. He came across the street and hugged me. He said, Val, I just want to know one thing. And I said, what? He said, can you just tell me it was honorable?
Yeah.
And I just said,
Fair.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was, more than I want to pay, but it's honorable.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nice to
So,
know that people still, even when they're upset and when they're ending these things and it's messy, they can still be fair. You know.
yeah, totally. And that's what I'd say. Most people are fair. And sometimes, you want to hire a non-combative lawyer and you want to have an agreement. Those are the two things, whether that's a cohabitation agreement, a marriage agreement, or a separation agreement.
Yeah.
If you think, oh, I'm in the house, but it's in our joint names, we'll deal with that 5 years from now. Now you're buying your house out from somebody 5 years later that you weren't expecting. You just want to be clear about that stuff. People make all kinds of assumptions.
That's great. What percentage of these divorces do you feel go fairly? Like, if you could put a rough number on it, versus the ones that get really
Oh,
combative and violent and vicious.
virtually all of them go fairly.
Wow.
Um, and having said that, there's always a spike, right?
Hmm.
There's always, I've had where a client threw a brick through the party's front window. Just all kinds of crazy stuff happens. So there's always a bump like that. Like, I'm the
Yeah.
person who's preached to my clients for years about keeping your kids out of the crap, and I know our kids got dragged through that, at least at the beginning, right? And we both have
Yeah.
narratives as to why the other person was a dick about that, right?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah,
As you do.
yeah.
Makes sense. So where can people look you up quickly? Where can people look you up?
Oh,
What's your
sure.
website?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you can go to Val Hemminger,
Yeah.
Val Hemminger, HEMMINGER.com, and you can reach out to me there. Or Pathway Legal, Pathway being singular, legal.ca.
Great.
And I've got the 10 bogus beliefs on my site at Pathway Legal. You can just download it right from there.
Great. Yeah. And you can help out pretty much anybody in BC, hey?
Oh, yeah, and other provinces too. But
Great.
yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks for the time, Val. This has been great. And we'll talk to you soon, eh?
Yeah, thank you so much.